Hey everybody, welcome to Signal and Noise podcast with Andrew DeSillis. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Joining us today, CEO of Brandtrust, Alex. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Brian. Great to see you again. Great to see you again, Andrew.
Always a pleasure.
And, we chatted for a second before the call, but I love the view, much better than my view and Andrew's view. The view that you have every day at work is amazing. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but I can picture in my mind. It's beautiful.
Well, the next time you're in Chicago, stop by.
Absolutely. I'll get a book to read. I'll get some snacks.
3 books.
Great.
That's right. 3 books and free snacks. You can always count on those 2 things at Brandtrust.
Absolutely. Love the library there. We stole that actually at a prior company. We stole that idea and built the library ourselves and modeled it after years. You've been on the podcast before, I think, but it's been a little while. I'd love you to maybe introduce yourself, some a little bit about your background, and then a little bit about Brandtrust as well.
Sure. I'll be really brief. So I've been CEO of Brandtrust for about a year. Brandtrust has been around about 25 years. We're a insights and strategy consultancy only. So deep research, principally qualitative one-on-one interviews, but also some qual scale, which is where we interact with you guys more often. And then what are the strategic implications of that research, whether that's a core brand strategy, maybe a brand refresh, maybe an innovation strategy, a customer experience strategy. Sometimes something as specific as, what should be the core idea of this new campaign for our company or product. But what's critical about that is we don't ever go beyond that. One thing that differentiates us from other brand consultancies, we don't do any activation, we don't do any brand design, we don't do any creative work or anything like that. And it's because, and I think this is something you guys can relate well to, it's because we believe that deep insight and core strategy need to be really just joined at the hip, really married at the center of an organization. And then there's lots of wonderful things that can be done with that. Lots of people who can create creative executions or partnerships or sponsorships or ad campaigns. But if they're all singing from the same hymnal and that hymnal is grounded in what we call human truth, which I'm guessing you'll probably ask me about next, that's what Brandtrust is all about. And my background is in more traditional brand consulting. Brandtrust kind of became known over the last 20 years for being boutique market research. And I've been helping to lead the company to a place where we're bringing those two things really together, research and strategy, joined at the hip and at the core of your business.
Fascinating. Yeah. And it's been a pleasure to get to work with you all over the last several years and to see that in action. I will say, working with you, you're one of the few clients where we're able to get together and actually review what you've done with the work that we do for you, and the insights that you're able to extrapolate from the quality scale and from the IDIs are truly remarkable. Actually presented with Brandtrust at Quirks a few years ago, and it's really incredible stuff. If you're not familiar with Brandtrust and their work, absolutely go check them out. We're gonna flip the cadence of the podcast today because when we were just speaking before we sort of hit record, you have a rant that you would like to begin with, Alex. That as an exercise, and I love this because we love the research rants. You had your annual meeting a few weeks ago,
Right.
And everyone got to do a research rant during that annual meeting. So we'd love to hear yours, and we'll start off the episode with that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a topic where if you wind me up, I will just keep going. So be sure to stop me. But my research rant is really squarely on the topic of quote unquote synthetic respondents or synthetic panels. And I want to be clear before I start my rant that it's not that I don't see any usage for or application for the ideas that are contained within this rant. And I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute. But my big rant is this idea that there is an AI, a synthetic programmed prompt engineered respondent that can fulfill all the needs of a market research function. And it's absurd to me on its face, principally for one core reason, which is that, I'll also just say a little bit more about me. I come from a world where that was strategy and activation and the insights we paid kind of lip service to. And we all thought we were so smart. We were smart brand strategists in New York and da-da-da. And what I learned once I got exposed to real deep insights like the kind that we develop at Brandtrust is that it's night and day. It's what's made possible by basing a strategy on real, true, deep human insight. It changes your way of thinking, and it changes what's possible for your company. And what that often means is that those types of insights are challenging assumptions. They are breaking through the day to day, the status quo, and they're giving you a totally fresh perspective on something. And as far as I can understand it, I am not a technologist, but as far as I can understand it, AI is a really fantastic assumption making machine. And so if you're going to get your net new insight, if you're going to get your fresh perspective, if you're going to get your business changing, fresh look on the world from an assumption making machine, I think you have a fundamental, issue with where it is you're looking for the answers to your questions. And I would also say that just to wrap up the rant here, I would also say that the world of technologists and the world of insights professionals are absolutely coming together. They're smashing together, they're combining, and they're going to produce some really wonderful things. They've already presented some pretty cool, produced some really cool things. But the world of the technologist is all the world of, we have the answer, we have the amazing new thing, we have this thing that is going to solve all of your problems. And the world of the insights professional is actually one of far less certainty. It's one of, are we asking the right question? What's happening here? Where do we go from here? And stuff like that. And so I find that those two styles and those two sort of like starting places often produces real, what's the word I'm looking for? It produces real sort of like cognitive dissonance for me. And I see it at the conferences. We have to make sure that we are thinking about technology and what it can do and what it can't do, and applying it judiciously and appropriately. And it can do amazing things. We cannot look at it as a producer of net new human insight. End rant.
I agree with you. That's a fantastic rant, by the way. I'm wondering, I have so many questions. All right. If you're saying that, and my belief is that it is challenging to get nuance and what you're saying, insights from synthetic respondents, right? Now that kind of inspired a thought, when I'm thinking quantitatively, could synthetic data even harm your data set, not just not provide additional insights? Could adding synthetic data to organic, that's what we're calling it, whatever, real human beings, could I just regress towards the mean and could reduce the impact of true insights or make it more challenging to identify new insights? Is number one. Or number two, you can still find perhaps the insights and the nuance with what you do, which is amazing, more qualitative in nature. But can we test that among human beings quantitatively? So if we're still going to do a qual, quant, very traditional marketing research plan, I'm curious about the impact of that for what you just said as well. So that's a lot of I just threw at you. So whatever you want to.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'll say, and I've said this every time I've come on your podcast before, that I'm going to say some things that are going to sound stupid because I don't have a quant background. That's the area that I play the least in. But it doesn't change the fact that we always have really interesting and fun things to talk about. So I will say this. I will say I do have some worries about. There was I wish I could remember her name to give her a shout out now, but there was an insights leader from Kraft Heinz who was on a panel at CRC, and she said on a panel about synthetic data and synthetic respondents, she said no data is better than bad data. And I think that's really important. And I think that if you get data that is essentially or insights or whatever you want to call it, that is reinforcing your assumptions in the guise of providing fresh perspective, that is incredibly dangerous. Yes, I think that is bad. And I think also that, as we've all seen in all of our interactions with ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever you choose, the bot sounds pretty authoritative. The bot sounds pretty smart. It sounds pretty convincing. And so I think there's even further danger there of taking something that's maybe not net new, not productive, not helpful, and making it sound like it's very authoritative and helpful. So I would say that. Now, when it comes to quant, I will say this. I think that there is a huge opportunity and a huge potential for disruption when it comes to AI in kind of the pure quant space. If you think about the brand tracker, if you think about the at scale segmentation, if you think about the kind of straight up survey, I mean, those are the kind of things that, as far as I can tell, an AI agent can kind of run a lot of that stuff for you, but it still needs to talk to a net new input if it is going to give you net new insight. Just querying its own data is not going to tell you anything new. So anyway, that's about as far as I feel like I can go with any personal sense of confidence when speaking about the quant side of it. I do think that there's a lot of possibility for quant to find efficiencies there, but to me, it has far less to do with respondents and sample, and it has far more to do with the execution of the research itself.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So I wonder then, do you see, like, you're the CEO, you're thinking long term, large strategic initiatives. Do you see an increase in the value of deep qualitative research in the future to inform these synthetic models? And that's kind of a yes or no question, but I think you have a unique perspective because Brandtrust operates in the deep qual space and the sort of qual at scale. So you make that jump frequently in
Yeah.
your projects. So if you could speak to how you kind of make that jump in your projects between, the emotional inquiry is kind of your patented product that goes to the nth level of depth. And then when you scale that, the next jump is synthetic, right? If you could talk a little bit about that process, how you scale your deep qual, and then whether or not you see that having a increased value moving towards the synthetic environment.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic question. Let me start by saying sort of what I think is what I thought was interesting a year ago, and now I think is sort of important, but also table stakes, which is crazy to me that something that I thought was, that felt revolutionary a year ago feels like table stakes already today. We've talked in the past about our strategic partnership with Protobrand because they apply some of the same applied social and behavioral science-based methodologies or beliefs and philosophies around research to qual at scale. And so we leverage some of their platforms to do that. A year ago now, a year and a half ago, no, what was it? I guess about a year ago. About a year ago, we started our strategic partnership with them. And it was because we thought, we saw that Brandtrust was really going to have we were going to have a tough learning curve around AI because we're so immersed in human truth. We just care so deeply about the human, and we had to figure out a way to, first of all, pull ourselves out of that and not leave it behind, but pull ourselves out of that and take kind of a fresh perspective of things, and then pull those things back together. And the thing that one of the main reasons we partnered with them for was because we saw they can create a better respondent experience with a AI powered prompt engineered AI moderator, virtual kind of moderator that they could deploy some of our approaches through qual at scale in a much more effective way. Now, I was just at CRC, and it's table stakes to be able to have an AI moderator. It's just everywhere. So what's the next thing we do? You can do it better or worse. You can have a better methodology that it's delivering or a worse methodology that it's delivering, but delivering that is table stakes. So kind of what's next? And as we thought about that here at Brandtrust, we had kind of like a big, I'm using this phrase because I used it in a presentation at CRC the other week, but a switch flipping moment where we stopped thinking about it as, how is AI going to generate more insight, and more, how are we going to deliver the insight that we generate better in a way that's more engaging, in a way that's more useful, in a way that's more enduring. And that's where we're at now. And I mean, I'd say that this is, I should be careful about what I say, except I think in some ways we're behind the game. I think other people are already thinking about this. But I'm not sure that anyone is thinking about it coming from such a committed standpoint and perspective around human truth leading the way as we are. And this idea is pretty simple, which is, if we have human derived insights, if we agree that the only way to get behind the survey taking mind and understand what are the real non-conscious drivers and barriers to decision making in your category, the associations people might have with your brand that might be positive or negative, all those things, if we say that we have to take a deep, indirect approach to deriving those research at that deriving those insights, I mean, it has to be human led. Well, what if we say, could we deliver them in a way that feels a little bit more human and a little bit more useful through maybe like an avatar? Could we prompt engineer and feed our data and feed not just the raw material of the transcripts, but feed the report and the insights and the strategic perspective that we bring to the table into that avatar, and then allow the client to, instead of get a 30-page, 50-page PowerPoint, say, engage with this avatar. And not only does that, we think, potentially increase the length, the life and the usefulness of the insights, it allows you to say there's different types of insights, right? There's net new insight, there's ground up insight that informs our whole perspective on how we engage with our customers in our category. And then there's maybe a different type of insight, or maybe we call this research, which is, could I bounce a couple of different concepts off of this construct that is fed by authentic insight? And so there's a way that I think that we could maybe create kind of a hybrid situation where people can focus their research, their outside research resources on the things that are going to really make a huge difference to the business, and invest in having an internal resource that can do some of the light liftings, the first touch stuff, but informed not from just a data set, but informed from from real human truth. That was a
Yep.
longer answer than you were probably looking for, but I guess I had a few rants teed up inside of me today. I'm sorry.
No, that was absolutely fantastic, and it answered my question well. One of the main frameworks we've seen, or buckets into which synthetic products fall, people talk a lot about creating digital twins. And I have seen products that do that on kind of like a one-to-one scale. I've seen that where there's a synthetic panel that is that then scaled out for kind of like a quantitative solution. And it's really interesting because some of the digital twin products do that by deriving the personas from significant amounts of alternative data. I'm curious if you have any sense of, or perhaps you've already experimented with it because you discussed exploring the creation of this avatar. Are the insights that you all are able to collect through your proprietary qualitative methodologies, does that have application in creating a synthetic persona, that kind of like one-to-one LLM? You can chat with your core customer segment. Have you all experimented with that? Do you think that it's applicable, or are your interviews too focused? What does that kind of feel like for Brandtrust?
Yeah, no, I think we might be talking about something very similar. Can you tell me a little bit more? This is where I get to ask stupid questions. What
Yeah.
exactly do you mean by alternative data? Do you mean just anything other than their internal data sets, or?
Yeah, so when I use the term alternative data, has a
Yeah.
lot of different contexts, by the way. One of the most common ones is using it to like derive stock prices and things like that for hedge funds. That's not what I'm talking about. In our context, in market research and in talking about a synthetic panel, alternative data would be any data source that is not collected from speaking with a human respondent, whether qualitative or quantitative. So, for example, building a customer segmentation based on social media data,
Okay.
CRM data, sales data,
Got it.
things of the shopper data, right?
Yeah.
If you're a CPG company, things like that.
I got it. No, that's helpful. I'll just say one quick note here because it just came up in a conversation with a client earlier today. I think that social media is a really interesting source of particular kinds of insights. I think it's really dangerous for training something that is going to be a real world replication of your brand, because not everyone goes on social media. For all the obvious reasons, like, unless you want to be marketing to the idea of something, of someone that they put out on social media, and that is then magnified, by the algorithms and produces responses in kind based on that. Great. But I mean, that's not, I think that stuff makes me really nervous as a source of quote unquote truth. But so I think we're talking about something really similar. And this actually kind of connects back to my rant on synthetic respondents, because I think one of the big issues with them is, and I might have made a LinkedIn post about this the other day, but is that I think it's kind of bad branding because if you say synthetic respondents, it implies the idea that they can give you anything that a respondent can give you. And they're not synthetic respondents. They're more like brand buddies or insights pals or something like that. Like you can I think that you can use the type of data and insights and transcripts and stories that our methodologies develop to train a avatar or a bot to be to be a productive partner in your internal partner in your insights ecosystem. That's what I'm talking about. I think that we could maybe, because what are we now except maybe we have 5 PowerPoint decks floating around your insights ecosystem. Is that as helpful as maybe having a avatar that you can have a conversation with in your insights ecosystem that's trained off of the studies that led to those 5 decks? I think the latter might be more useful, but I think it's important to note that it's not, I would never say that that's a replacement for the type of research that requires respondents, human respondents. It's more like a way to capture and categorize and make more engaging the insights that you do have. And I think a lot of people are out there doing that already with like data sets. But I think that what we think might be interesting to bring to the table is, what if you did it with input into it the non-conscious drivers of decision making, the emotion-based perspectives and beliefs that really drive decision making in your category? What if we could bring that in there? Then wouldn't that actually help you get further along in your process, whatever it is, your innovation process, your campaign development process, your blah, 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 before you decided it was time to say, okay, now let's go talk to some humans about this? And again, I think about it as sort of like more of like a really engaging repository of brand knowledge combined with the human dimensions of choice and decisions in your space. I think about it as that more than I think about it as a quote unquote respondent.
Mm. I wanted to ask you to dive deeper on something that you just said, because I think it might be the crux of getting the right kind of values out of synthetic respondents. When you were talking about the kind of like unconscious drivers, the deeply held beliefs, that is what Brandtrust refers to as human truth. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
that's
less?
correct.
Could you kind of define that for us as far as how you all think about human truth? And then I think it would be really helpful to understand, like an actual example of
Yeah.
human truth, as far as here's the first layer, here's the second layer, here's the truth that we uncovered underneath it. I know that's probably really basic to you, but I think for myself and Brian and for our listeners, it would be really great if you could walk us through that.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to really have to be careful to try to be brief here, which I'm not really known for. But we gave a 20-minute presentation on this topic at TMRE last year. And I think we redid it as a webinar. So I'd encourage people to go check that out if they're interested. Maybe we can link to it. But so because there's a lot of applied social and behavioral science, and now even neuroscience behind this simple phrase that we use to capture it all, which is human truth. But the short version is, it is all the deeper non-conscious drivers of preference and decision making that shape human behavior, as opposed to those things that we ourselves think shape our behavior. Like we think, oh, I chose that burger because it was, 50 cents cheaper, or I chose that coffee because it was closer, or something like that. But in reality, if you actually examine all of the various behaviors that you make and choices behaviors you exhibit and choices you make over a given day, you do lots of things that are very irrational, right? Like you buy the more expensive faucet, you walk 3 blocks longer than you have to get a cup of coffee. You do all these different things, and it's because there's a lot of different things going on inside your brain that are shaping those decisions. And it is true of all of us, right? It's true of the 3 of us right now. It's true of someone going out there and buying, a very, very expensive car, and also buying a $1 coffee, if such a thing exists anymore. So an example of this would be, and I'll actually go to sort of an interesting category where people might, because people might say, oh, this is all consumer and stuff like that. We do actually do a lot of work in pharma, and we do a lot of work in financial services. We do a lot of B2B stuff. There's a great pharma example of this that comes to mind for me, which is that, and it's particularly apropos because it's a classic example of an organization thought that the functional benefit was good enough to be it, right? If you, my product is better, why do people not just buy it if I tell them that my product is better? So there was this drug, and the therapy space was HIV, and this drug had tested, it had gone through clinical trials, and it was far more effective than the next most effective drug in suppressing the HIV, in suppressing the virus, and making sure that someone who was HIV positive never developed AIDS. And they were number 5 in the market of these different therapies. And the client came to us and said, what is going on here? We can't figure this out. We're marketing it as the strongest one out there, and it's just not working. And we went and did a whole bunch of interviews with prescribers, with healthcare professionals in this space. And what we determined was a few different things that were the actual human truth of the decision-making process in this space. One was that they were trying to keep they were trying to keep strength, like the really strong, the thing that was the most effective and strongest treatment. They like to keep to a later line of treatment, a line of therapy. They wanted to make sure that, let's try something else first. Let's try something else second. If that doesn't work, I always have this really strong thing in the backup, and as a backup. And secondly, there was an association between strength and side effects. This therapy didn't happen to have a lot of side effects, but there was an association in the mind of the prescriber that strength equals side effect. And so what we help them understand is that you're actually marketing it all wrong, because the functional benefit that you're touting is bringing up all sorts of really bad non-conscious associations for healthcare professionals in this space. And we help them understand that they should go to talking about it as the most effective at driving you to undetectable. They went from number 5 to number 1 in less than a year, and it's been a huge success story since then. So that's just one example in a very, like, supposedly, like, aren't doctors supposed to be purely rational? Like, isn't the healthcare space supposed to be all about efficacy? No, in every space, we make decisions for all sorts of weird reasons because humans are very complicated. And if you don't dig down and find the actual reason behind it, then you're going to put yourself at a disadvantage, or worse, actually tank a product that should be successful.
That's really fascinating. And I'm going to try to kind of state it back to you and reapply it to our case at the same time, because this is so illustrative of, I think, kind of the point that we're trying to make. Because if you told a synthetic digital twin, something like that, all of these kinds of things about you're a physician and you're this and you're that, and your patients are this and they're afraid of this, and even some kind of like qualitative assumptions that you would make, I imagine that, like you said, here's a physician, they have this degree, they're looking at these clinical trials that have been completed. Clearly we're going to go with the most clinically effective option. And if you don't instruct that model, that, and I think when you were kind of just saying like it's strong, I think about a strong medicine and I get worried about the side effects as well.
Right.
But I think, like, particularly that insight, and I'm hugely into AI and I love messing around with prompt engineering and have all kinds of custom spaces that I give them a story. But to say, I like to have a backup plan. I am conservative in the course of treatments that I use. And thus, by saying, like, this is kind of my ace in the hole, because, like, right, if the strongest one doesn't work, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so being able to then, like, theoretically tell the model, tell the AI, hey, this is something that you need to do. Only after uncovering that would you be able to then try different messages, like it's the most effective at, going to undetectable rather than using those words of strength. Like, that model would work if you all at Brandtrust hadn't first uncovered those truths of how the prescribers are making the decisions. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I think you've captured it well, and I think that goes exactly to what I think maybe some of the opportunities and limitations of this idea of a kind of, a customer, I don't know, I don't have the word for it yet. If maybe one of us can come up with the word for it, but whatever this brand bot or this customer, buddy is or whatever. I think if you were to feed it the right type, the outputs of those types of interviews, as well as our synthesis of them and our report out on them, so they understood what the takeaway, so the bot understood what the takeaways were, or the avatar understood what the takeaways were, then you could have a conversation with it that I think it would be less about. I honestly think it would be less about like testing things or like doing research. It would be more about kind of like a really good creative partner or sparring partner, how to bring the customer into the room with you. Because imagine in this scenario, the marketing team for this pharma company could be like, well, tell me about what you think about this, treatment or whatever. And the bot's not going to give them the answer, but they could be say something about like, does this bring up any concerns about, side effects for you? And the bot could probably say, well, yes, I think it does bring up some concerns. Then you could even say, could you share a story with me about that? And it could literally pull up verbatim a story from the transcript. But it's so different than thinking about it as market research. You know what I mean? It's more thinking about it. How can we feed and train this asset so that it can so it can level up your whole team with the power of insights? That to me is a far different argument for me than a replacement for market research.
That is really fascinating to think about, because I think within our confined space, our side of the pond instead of the ocean, whatever metaphor you want to use, for Brian and I working in like quantitative sampling, we have kind of the blinders on and thinking of these synthetics as ways to improve the efficiency of, to scale, so on and so forth. Like the survey research that we're doing, or the qualitative research function that our clients are performing, right?
Yep.
So maybe it's because you always do like insights and strategy that you think of it that way. But yeah, perhaps is our thought process and how to use these technologies then become, let's feed these new products that will change the way that brands do marketing, that brands strategy,
or innovation. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, or innovation, R&D, right? Instead of just thinking about like, how does this affect research the way that we think about it now? How does this affect the way that people are using what we think of as research now? So yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a very interesting thought starter for our listeners. Brian, I've been totally dominating the back and forth. I apologize for that. Do you have any other questions for Alex? I know we're coming up on kind of like the time that we had thought here, and certainly want to be respectful of your time, Alex. We know you're very busy.
I just have two quick things. One is going back to your secondary rant about the term synthetic data. That's my favorite part of that whole post that you said. I mean, I just imagine there's all these quant nerds thinking about what we're doing, and we just name it synthetic data without even understanding what we're talking about. And then, 3 years later, someone with a human truth background that it isn't a quant researcher, but is more of a reasonable researcher, I guess is what I would call it. It's like, what are y'all doing? You need to rebrand. That's my favorite part of the whole thing, number one. And I wish we had more time. I'd love to have you back on, because that was fascinating, that last discussion about what you guys do. It's amazing. But I'd love to get more in depth with the deliverable aspect of the AI and the avatar, because I hadn't really thought about it like that, and that's fascinating to me. And so I'm clearly behind the curve. I want to talk about that more. So
Well,
I'd love to have you back on.
yeah, no, definitely. And I'll also say, we're trying to figure that out ourselves because we're not technologists. But that's where we see the potential,
Yeah.
the best possible trajectory, where there's an intersection between what we do and what the technology makes possible. But we don't know exactly, like, we're trying it out now. And I'm doing a little research. I'm seeing some people who say that they're doing similar things. I think they're feeding it more with like typical qualitative interviews. And I think that's potentially the differentiator there. But I think it's really interesting. And I'd love to, as we make more progress on it, I'd love to come back on and
Yeah.
share more about that with you.
And the last point I'll make, and Andrew, I'll let you finish it off, is when we presented you, we touched on it earlier, and Andrew mentioned it, and it was one of the more valuable things I've ever done professionally. And For those that, I think we did a podcast on it years ago, but we did a mental health presentation in Chicago. I think it was in Chicago at Quirks, using emotional inquiry, narrative inquiry. And I remember the data we got back. I could not read through more than about 2 or 3 respondents without shedding tears.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the most emotional research I've ever done in my entire career. I've been doing this for over 25 years now. And I had to sit down about 10 separate times in order just to read the data that we gathered.
I remember
And that is a
too.
credit to the methodology that you all have. And for you, this is just standard operating procedure, right? You get people to open up about lots of things. For me, that was like such a like an amazing thing as a researcher that evaluates lots of quantitative data, gets decent open ends because we're really good researchers. We design good questionnaires. This was next level, and so I hope that you all are. I hope it's good enough from your perspective to leverage as a case study or something, because I was really impressed with it, and it's something I'm really actually proud of. So anyway, I'll say that. And Andrew, follow up that, buddy.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure, if we were able to link to the webinar that you've done, Alex, we can probably find where you published some of those findings as well. If our readers want to check out that study around mental health and seeking mental health treatment and things of that nature, because that was indeed some really powerful research. Alex, I think Brian has a research rant to close us off.
I was thinking that as a company, we have our digital fingerprinting dashboard is leveraged to, for us, it's mostly to try to uncover duplicates across panels when we outsource.
Yeah.
We don't have a fraud problem with our panel. Others do. And so we're evaluating different fraud dashboards, right? And I was thinking, gosh, there's Research Defender, there's Survalidate, there's Detect, there's Verisol, there's Imperium, there's Relevant ID, there's Sentry, there's Queen's ID, which I never heard of until I did a little research. Torfac has this thing called Torfac Global Checks. There's others I hadn't heard of, Seraph and iOvation, and there's Count with a K. I'm like, man, there's so many options out there to prevent fraud. But how many options do we have to verify that someone's actual human being? You put them through something at the beginning of the survey and say, "Up, we're level 1 confidence that you are who you say you are," or whatever that is. Maybe I'm ignorant to it, but we've got 20. I just named about 10 different options, and there's probably triple that I'm unaware of fraud checking. I'm sure there are a couple human checking, but that to me is really interesting to me that we spend as an industry all of our money and time just to catch the fraud. We know fraud exists. We're just trying to identify it and then stop it. Rather than before they would enter the survey, let's put them through something to prove they're a human being. I mean, we do this. We all have the new Real IDs. We all have in the US, and I think we have the ability to do this for somewhat inexpensively. And am I wrong, Andrew? I'm going to go to you first before we get Alex's opinion on this. But am I ignorant thinking about this?
I mean, I think it's a little bit semantics whether or not because if you're trying to prove someone is human, if they're not, the main objective is still to identify the people who aren't. Right. I understand what you're saying, though. So you're proposing something that would be like a more active.
Instead of, we're looking at your digital fingerprinting and your IP address and all of your markers and how you move your mouse and your internet speed and the language of your keyboard. We're using those and dozens of other variables to say, oh, this person's likely fraud, right? And we put a risk score on it, and that's how most of them typically work.
Yep.
We're so and so confident that this person is not a real human being. They're probably committing fraud because of A, B, C, and D. You can adjust those scores up and down, and you can block them, right? Rather than just saying, hey, uploaded the government ID, or doing some sort of check in your email address that's like, oh, this person's been using this email address for 12 years. They've sent 4,000. I don't know. I think that's possible, right? With what we can do with digital stuff. I just think that we're trying to prevent the fraud rather than to prove that this is an actual human being.
So like we're focusing on the contrapositive instead of trying to get somebody to prove they're human.
Yes, thank you. Much better said.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly rational to propose that, and I think that at the end of the day, a solution like that would be most helpful, because when we have all it right, you and I have played around with different softwares where it's like, okay, well, if we ratchet it all the way up, what happens? And like no one gets through, right? So
Right, we could do that.
and we've also
No
done
bots. Congratulations. No human
well,
beings either.
we've done tests as well where, so like we, and Alex, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but like, so here at ROI Rocket, a large portion of our work actually is qualitative in nature. So we do a lot of like in-home use testing where we're mailing people products, they're using them, handling them, taking
I think we've used you to find some qual respondents, some specialty cases. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. We do a lot of like IDIs, online focus groups, in-person focus groups, in-person like neuro work, really, really cool stuff like that. But so what's been great for Brian and I and all of our online panel nerdiness is that we have this subset of our panel that we consider to be experientially verified. Because if, someone gets onto an IDI with you or one of your researchers, Alex, and they're not who they say they are,
Oh yeah,
going to know that immediately, right? And same thing with like, if you're lying about where you live, we can't mail you a product, right? So we now have the ability to identify false positives. And that's really fascinating because there are a lot of them when you start to use these softwares. So I think, Brian, having someone meet a challenge of some sort, I think that you would reduce the amount of false positives, but I would also, and maybe this is a different episode, we
Probably.
talked to like Cam Wall from Ola Surveys is building one of the first IG verified panels. He would be someone to tease around this idea with.
Yeah. And he's doing that. Yeah.
He is doing that. Yeah, absolutely he is. And I think he's going to come on the podcast too.
Yeah.
But I'm interested when the respondent experience is already so awful.
right.
Are we really going to add more friction to that of, oh, I don't have my wallet in my pocket?
Well, think about how excited you are when you open up a Microsoft product or something, and it's how many bicycles do you see in this, grid, or how many bridges or buses or,
And I'm about 25% success on that as a human being.
Exactly. I have no idea. I don't think I am a human by that test, as far as I can tell.
Right.
No, I love the idea. Let's build a product around it. We'll go from there. Alex, do you have any closing thoughts for us? Where can people find you? Where can they find Brandtrust?
Well, I'm happy to say you can find us at brandtrust.com. Very simple. We're pretty active on LinkedIn, and I'd love if when you post this, if we could maybe post a link to that webinar on human truth. It's a good primer on sort of what are the foundational parameters of the philosophy that leads to, hey, what we always say is business challenges are human challenges, and humans are complicated. So you need to dig a little bit deeper, and I welcome anyone to come check us out, learn a little bit more about us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all the time, Alex. As always, absolutely fascinating content.
So fun to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
Great to see you. Thanks for the con. This is awesome. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.